Zombies, super plagues, nuclear winter. It feels like our culture is just obsessed with the end of the world. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into that. We're going to deconstruct that obsession and figure out why. Why are we so fascinated by stories of our own collapse?
And you know what? It is absolutely not an accident. We're constantly telling these stories about civilization just falling apart. We use that aftermath as this powerful lens, right? It's a way for us to really examine and critique the flaws in our own world, right here, right now.
I mean, why? Why are we so obsessed with the end? This whole fascination feels so modern, doesn't it? Like it's all tied up in our current anxieties. But what if I told you that this obsession, it's hiding something much deeper? A much, much more ancient story. A story about humanity's purpose, our greatest fears, and a single word, a word whose original meaning we've almost completely forgotten.
I mean, just look around. Our pop culture is absolutely saturated with this stuff. You've got everything from the pandemic fears in Stephen King's The Stand to the total societal breakdown in The Road. It feels like this genre is just constantly reinventing itself, Always finding a new way to reflect whatever our latest, deepest anxieties happen to be.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this modern obsession, we have to go back, way back, all the way back to the beginning, to what that word apocalypse actually means. And I'm telling you what it originally meant, well, it's probably not what you think. It might just surprise you. All right, let's get into it. The word apocalypse, it comes from the Greek apokalypsis. And here's the kicker. It didn't mean disaster. It didn't mean catastrophe at all. It meant an unveiling, a revelation. Think of it like pulling back a giant curtain to reveal some deeper, hidden truth about the entire universe. That's a pretty big difference, right?
And you have to understand where this kind of storytelling came from. It really flourished among marginalized groups, people who felt like their world was already collapsing. They were living through crisis and oppression, and they were desperate. They longed for some kind of divine intervention that would finally pull back that curtain, unveil the truth, judge the wicked, and just set things right. So you see, it was a literature of hope, not just doom and gloom.
And wow, this idea has incredibly deep roots. It draws on these ancient concepts of a huge cosmic struggle, good versus evil. And it really took off as a literary genre during times of immense social pressure. I mean, look at the book of Daniel. That was a direct response to persecution. And the book of Revelation, that was basically a powerful, coded protest against all the injustices of the Roman Empire.
Okay, so at the heart of this great unveiling was this idea of a final divine judgment. But, and this is a big but, the outcome of that judgment, it was way more complicated than the simple heaven or hell choice we tend to think about today.
For literally centuries, theologians have been wrestling with this. I mean, really, truly debating what happens at the end. And they've come up with at least three major and profoundly different possibilities for the ultimate fate of, well, everyone and everything.
So the options on the table were way more complex than you might think. First, you've got annihilation. The idea here is that evil isn't punished forever, it's just erased. Poof, gone. Then there's eternal punishment, which is probably the one we're all most familiar with. And then there was universal salvation. This was the really radical idea that in the end, God's love is so powerful, it would ultimately save every single being, no exceptions.
And modern thinkers like C.S. Lewis, wow, he explored this with so much nuance. He put forward this idea that maybe hell isn't a punishment that's forced on you from the outside. Maybe it's the state of being you choose when you constantly reject goodness. As he put it, in the end, God basically says, "Thy will be done." You just get what you've been insisting on for all eternity. It's a heavy thought, right?
And that idea of choice, of getting the end that you insist on, that's the perfect bridge to our modern world, because it brings up a massive question. What happens when we shift from a world where maybe God ends things to a world where we can end them ourselves? How in the world did we get from divine judgment to straight-up man-made doom?
Well, the answer really lies in how our fears have evolved. Think about it. In the past, the biggest threats to civilization were seen as, acts of God or nature, volcanoes, floods, plagues. But in the modern era, the things that really threaten our existence, they're increasingly of our own making.
So here's what happened. As society became more and more secular, our anxieties didn't just vanish into thin air. Nope, they just shifted. We basically stopped worrying so much about divine judgment and started worrying about the consequences of our own creations, our science or technology, our wars.
And you can literally trace this shift through modern history. It's fascinating. Mary Shelley was writing about a global pandemic way back in 1826 in The Last Man. Then the World Wars showed us what destruction on an industrial scale really looks like. The Cold War, of course, hung the constant threat of nuclear annihilation over everyone's heads. And now, today, our apocalyptic stories are fueled by fears of ecological collapse and terrorism.
Which brings us full circle, right back to the beginning. We can now connect that ancient religious idea of apocalypse with all our modern secular fiction. And believe me, they are way more similar than you might think.
Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if the threat is divine judgment or a zombie virus. These stories, they serve the exact same function. The writer James Berger put it perfectly. He called them a total critique of the world we live in now.
Think about it. They strip everything away. Our laws, our economies, our social rules, all the noise of daily life. It's all gone. And in that silence, they force us to confront what actually matters. In other words, they perform a great unveiling, just like the original definition. They expose all these uncomfortable truths about our society, our priorities, and ultimately, about ourselves.
And that's why these stories have such incredible power over us. It's because they aren't really about the end of the world. They're about us. The end of the world is just a stage, a backdrop, where we can finally ask our deepest questions. Questions like, what do we owe each other? What holds a community together? And what does it really mean to be human when everything has fallen apart?
So, next time you watch a zombie movie or pick up one of these books, try this. Don't just ask yourself, are they going to survive? Instead, ask yourself, what is this story revealing about us right now? What flaws in our own world is it holding up to the light? And what kind of future is it desperately trying to warn us about?